This research project began with an unusual find at Isle Royale National Park in 1985. I was fortunate enough to work with a group of diving archaeologists in the U.S. National Park Service, the Submerged Cultural Resources Unit, during the Isle Royale study. We had been working on the Algoma Shipwreck site, but due to bad weather decided to try to locate the remains of a lost aircraft in the sheltered waters of Rock Harbor near the Shipwreck mine site. We were diving off Jerry Buchanan's boat and used diver propulsion vehicles to search the bottom. I found the airframe and my dive partner, Dave Bouchard, found what he described as a hand-turned pot. We then marked the site, returned to the boat, and traded the DPVs in for cameras. We then videotaped and surveyed the remains of the aircraft. When we swam over to the ceramic pot, we found it to be prehistoric. We then videotaped it in situ. A series of dives were subsequently done to survey the area and excavate the pot. The pot radiocarbon dated to 1000 years BP and is stylistically Juntuan. It was likely produced near the Straits of Michilimackinac and made its way to Isle Royale, hundreds of miles away, by travel and trade. The Shipwreck mine was mined historically for copper, and there's a prehistoric copper mine site there as well. So we began from that point to search out and look for our prehistoric trade route. And one of the first things we did was to start looking at a number of prehistoric copper mines.
So Scott, one of the first Europeans here was a Jesuit priest named Father de Blanc in 1672.
Yeah, and when he got here, he found the indigenous people that lived at the mouth of the river were still mining copper. And while this vein does have a lot of iron ore in it, I think they were also working this vein. If you look, you can see that it's 3.5 feet deep, 40, 50 feet long. This didn't hollow out naturally by itself. By using big rocks, they pounded on this material, they hogged out all that ore, and they were still able to find little pea-sized pieces of copper. They flattened them out and made them into beads. But this is actually a prehistoric mine, copper mine, very similar to the ones I've looked at Isle Royale. Yeah, so I think if you look in here, you can still see little micro flakes of copper in the rock. In addition to prehistoric copper mines, we also reviewed and looked at all known additional Great Lakes regional archaeological sites. Okay, so we're at the mouth of the Michipicoten River. One of the things we did that was less conventional was to look at the prehistoric trade route we were studying in the winter months rather than just the summer. So here we are back at Lake Superior. It's great to be here. This is the tip of the Sleeping Giant, and we're about 20 miles from Isle Royale, and 6,500 years ago, prehistoric copper mining people were traveling out to Isle Royale. They were some of the world's first metal workers, and this is one of the places that they came to and camped in before making the blue water crossing over to Isle Royale. The more we studied our prehistoric trade route, the more we became engrossed in Anishinaabe culture. Prehistoric people in this part of the world had a belief system that we call anism. Under that belief system, trees could have spirits, lakes, streams, rivers could have spirits, rocks could have spirits. Interesting rock formations, waterfalls, all of these things had their own spirits, their own souls, and their own stories. And it's when you understand how these stories work, you understand how prehistoric people navigated. They traveled the Great Lakes by going from story to story.
Okay, and in this set of pictographs, we have 2 canoes, one with 2 men in it, another canoe with 8 men, paddle at the bow, paddle at the stern. And here we see a sea serpent. And that could be a sign of dangerous waters ahead that you had to be careful. Oliver Lake right next door is a very large lake. It could be treacherous boating, you can get big waves on it. So they put a lot of information into pictographs to help travelers new to the area.
One of the things that really helped us to try to understand how the trade route worked is we were fortunate enough to be able to spend hundreds of hours flying around in small planes. We had friends who owned aircraft, or occasionally we were able to charter aircraft, and it was only by getting up in the air and having a look at the trade route, going from point A to point B, that we finally started to understand how it worked. The pot that was discovered at Isle Royale was actually the second time I'd been on a dive in which prehistoric ceramics had been found underwater. The area was of interest to me. It was a sort of a principal study area. There were things like historic mining operations like the Silver Islet mine that had a submerged component that we could study. There are 3 shipwrecks in the area, the Theano, the Mystery, and the Kekabeka. And so over the years, we did hundreds, if not thousands, of dives, and we used all sorts of technology. Proton magnetometers, side-scan sonars, rove units, underwater video, underwater metal detectors. And what we found that we had the most success with is just working with divers in the local sport diving community who, through their own observations as divers, had come across things like prehistoric materials underwater, and slowly we were able to put the pieces together. The part of the project that I like the best is over the years I made a great many friends, people that had different areas of specialization, but we're all attracted to the same type of study, the same area, the same parts of the world. And the best part of the whole project is I get to work with my old colleagues again.